I don't need to reintroduce David Stern again, but I guess I will. I think during his tenure, we've seen basketball become an American game that has been truly global, and you can see it when you go to the Olympics, when you go to any country in the world practically and see people dribbling a basketball. And as you know, he has decided to step down, and I guess they finally caught up with you. But it's a remarkable achievement, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage. Thank you. And our second commissioner, or CEO, is from another completely American sport. Brian France is the head of Nascar, the third generation. He's the new guy on the scene. And NASCAR started as a regional sport and has become, certainly national, on its way to being truly global. And I'd like to welcome him to the stage. Thank you. Now, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman was supposed to be here, but I locked him out. Just a little commissioner joke, sorry.
It was very funny.
Now, NASCAR did turn into the NHL a little bit this Sunday, and I understand they made a donation to the foundation on behalf of...
Yeah, well, anytime I'm going into an important event like this where we're trying to raise some money and all that, we try to give a little help with a good fight on the racetrack that we had on the Sunday. So, yeah, we did have a contribution by some of our drivers and crew members.
Well,
happy to help.
I'm sure that won't be repeated anytime soon. Now, you are the heads of sports, but you also are the heads of large businesses that compete with each other for the entertainment dollar, and those dollars are pretty scarce these days. Yet each commissioner has decided to band together and get behind social activism. You're a business. What's the point?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, the point is that while we compete from time to time, the reality is we share many of the same partners, media partners, many of the same companies that help from a sponsorship standpoint. Don't just go with one league or another. They go to many, many different sports and outlets. And when we need to work together for the greater good, we've always done that. Maybe not as visible as a beyond sport setting, but whether it's whatever market that's been affected, in this case, obviously recently with the big storm Sandy, our drivers, even though we don't have a home team here, our drivers and owners and others marshaled a lot of support to the Red Cross and other organizations. So you'll see, and now I think the environment obviously is now in the last, decade or so, become front and center with what's important to future fans, young people, everybody. And so now you're seeing some steps where different leagues are going in the same direction and maybe going to get there a different way. So I don't think it's a revelation that from time to time we're going to always work together with big, important things.
Well, I think the other thing we share are values. Mm-hmm. And how can you not share the value of social responsibility, helping others, and using sport as a real instrument for change and good? It sounds a little corny, but it's true, in society. And I think that's why Nick, who I thank especially for knocking a decade off my service, I appreciate that, actually.
Commissioner, speaking of the storm, it caused the big opening game of the Brooklyn Nets to be canceled. There was controversy about the New York Marathon first going on and then being canceled. The argument from the marathon was that it was a diversion, that it would just give people some entertainment at a tough time. So what was behind that decision, and what has the league done to kind of get behind the relief effort?
Well, it was actually, in the context of what happened at Sandy, it was not a big game, it was a little game.
Mm-hmm.
The destruction and despair that engulfed New York City was incredible. And it was an easy decision to make, made easier by calling the mayor and saying, Mayor Mike, what do you think? And he talked a bit, and we collectively realized that when you have a building that advertises 11 trains coming to its front door, none of which is running, it's probably a good idea to cancel. Mm-hmm. And also stop the use of resources for a game that might be better used elsewhere. What we're doing is, the potpourri of NBA staff being out there in affected communities, doing blood drives. Our players are out there. Our NBA Jam Van, the 18-wheeler, is being used as for storage, medical supplies, generators on site and the like. I think at that point we're just reflective of what the rest of the city is doing. Everyone's pitching in some shape or form. And I guess together with our Players Association, we donated $1 million to the Red Cross, which seems to be the primary deliverer of aid in this context.
Thank you.
And all of our teams did too. Our teams are sending money up, and independently, everyone's moved. If you're watching the images, it's a little, it's funny. I really don't think the decision to cancel a game is a big deal. Mm-hmm. In terms of what happened, but it's the decision to when to schedule it. We were the first game back in New Orleans after Katrina. We were the first professional sporting event. That, to me, was an important signal that of faith and hope, so that we're going to be back. And we also scheduled an all-star game there at a time when people said we were crazy because the city was never coming back. And if you don't help it to come back, then it never will. So I don't think the canceling is as important as the ultimate scheduling.
Well, while we're in Brooklyn, the building itself was controversial, and it seems to be part of a redevelopment of that area that is actually showing some promise.
It depends which picket line you're standing on. The reality is that the building has been a huge psychological boost to a neighborhood, which suddenly you see people writing in the New York Times, yellow cabs are actually coming to Brooklyn. That's neat. And an area is alive, and restaurants are opening, and hockey will be coming as well as basketball, so there'll be, with exhibitions and some playoffs, sort of like 100 games of life. It does great things for the psyche of a community and the business of a community.
Now, in terms of NASCAR's development, and you need obviously large sites to run races, how does that factor in community development?
Well, it is tougher for us to develop new speedways, and for two reasons. One, as you said, we need a lot of land, we need a big footprint. The second part of it is that we don't enjoy the public-private partnerships that almost every other major league in this country enjoys for different reasons. So it's largely private capital that must be sort of put at risk, and so for those two reasons, we have more difficulty with new stadiums.
Well, then how then can you relate to the community the way the Brooklyn Nets or the New York Knicks can do?
Well, we have facilities all over the country, and and we've been, a few years ago when the big hurricane hit down in South Florida, it was very similar to what David just described. It was our people, our resources, that contributed to any number of things to get that community back online. And I might say, we've got an office here in New York with a whole lot of people that were affected and live in greater New York or New Jersey. So it's not just, do you have a stadium here? I mean, we all have people that we know, and we all see the images on television, and it's just this is what our country does. It rallies for people that have been put in harm's way for no reason of their own, and that's a great thing about this country.
take that. But at the same time, you are competitors. I mean, even though...
Not exactly.
Okay.
I mean, when Brian makes a new TV deal, as he recently did, an increased rights fee, we sit there going, great. Okay, and in fact, we root him on because it's a reflection of the value that sports programming has. And the same is true every time another sports league, comes up with a new sponsor category and a new sponsor idea. I think we're very much united in some way in the learning that is running a professional sports league, and watch what all of our teams do. Teams may be competing to a degree, getting a national sponsor to be a local sponsor, and the sponsor may have decided to only do 10 rather than all 30. But what we learn from each other is incredible, both within the league and watching others. So we don't think of NASCAR and the other leagues as competitors, but really sort of fellow travelers in this wonderful world of sports that continues to grow on a global basis.
We always say that, we can't win when other people lose anyway. David's exactly right. We share many of the same partners. Sure, from time to time they get a certain deal here or there that we might have liked from a sponsorship, or maybe some admission tickets, but this is a country built on sports, lots of sports, and we'll get our share if we do run our business right, and they're certainly going to get their share in these historically important organizations of sport in this country.
My focus here is formed by my experience when I became involved with the NBA before I became commissioner. And we had 24 people in the building, and I was very curious to know what do you do for this thing called a sports league? And I remember that Pete Rozelle said, David, I'll put you in touch with Bob Carey, who was then running NFL properties. And those that remember will remember that NBA properties began to look a lot like NFL properties. And there was something called Major League Baseball Productions, where Mel Allen did This Week in Baseball, and NBA Entertainment began to look a lot like Major League Baseball Productions. And so whenever there's a visitor, the Australian Rules Football League, I think it used to be called the VFL, I think has a salary cap in its collective bargaining agreement, because someone knocked on my door in 1980 and said, how does this thing work? I said, come on in, what can we share with you? And I think that's been my experience for all sports leagues. We cooperate.
Or you steal ideas.
And steal ideas. That's right.
Sure.
That's right.
Borrow ideas.
We're actually, everything's out there. If whether it's use of social media, deals in different countries and the like. It's a big world out there with more people, shall we say, unserved. So there's a lot of room left before we get into tight spaces with other leagues.
I also think if you looked at our organizations, team level, racetrack level, league level, you're going to see a lot of people that have worked in different places. I mean, a lot. And so that's just the nature of the sports industry.
You bet.
Now, social responsibility has evolved too, and I wonder if you, having had more experience in this, tell me how it's evolved in the NBA and what have been the hot points over the years?
I'll have to go back and think about it. I just remember there was a time when our teams did little or nothing, and I used to sit there saying, this is an important area. That whether you think it's doing good or doing well, they will ultimately merge together. And community relations is what we called social responsibility back in the day. That's going to be about how people think of you, but more importantly, that's going to be how they feel about you. And communications, public relations, is going to be how they think about you. And you want the community to feel good about you. And so I sold it as either a business opportunity or the right thing. I didn't really care how our teams got to that point because I knew it would take off. And eventually we wound up with community relations departments, 30 teams, okay? It started with a community relations director, and now our teams have multiple departments, foundations, and just understand that it's implicit in the DNA of the business, and they don't even think about it. And I think that's wonderful because the communities have come to depend on our teams and our efforts. And as I've had said on more than one occasion, government cannot do it all. And if the private sector doesn't do it, whether by doing it or calling attention to it or in some other broad way, it's not going to get fully done.
I think there was three things for us. Number one, like David said, there's a moment in time where you just know what the right thing to do is. Let's start with that. And then for us, there were two other important issues. One is that if you look at the young fan today, I'm 50 years old, and when I was growing up, the environment and all, it wasn't central to my life when I was in my 20s and so on. That's changed, and rightfully so. And so young customers of ours that we hope to attract, they want to see that the sport that they care about and appreciate is doing things that they're doing, responsible things. And the third point, rather, is if you look at NASCAR is much more dependent on its corporate sponsorship base than any other league. And when you look at the companies that have a huge position with us, the car companies, Coca-Cola, which has got an unbelievable social, environmental approach, it's very important to them that their partners are doing things that are in line with their own efforts. And so we've been able to marry all that together. And listen, this is a work in progress because, the reality is we're going to do often things that are more symbolic than, moving a giant needle to deal with a carbon footprint or a carbon offset. But nonetheless, it's a work in progress. It's a long road, and it never ends. I tell our people all the time, we're going to keep bolting on intelligent things that our entire sport, our drivers, teams, and tracks. We've had a lot of participation. We've had the first solar farm built in Pocono, not only powered the speedway, but powered a region. We're the largest recycler in sports. We should be. We got tires and we've got cell phones and all kinds of things that help drive our sport. So we're going to be on a never-ending road to try to accomplish small and big things.
I thought you were going to say you had a solar-powered car. That's coming down the road.
It's coming.
But how do you've got teams and they live in communities. You have drivers that they are their own teams in a way. I know there's ownership teams. How do the drivers then connect with communities?
Well, they do it in a lot of ways. Number one, they all have pretty prolific foundations. They all have tried to figure out different places to make an impact. Jimmy Johnson, our reigning 5-time champion, has done more in his home state of California, which is where they tend to focus, not where they're living today, but where they grew up and so on in their own communities back home. That happens all the time. And the NASCAR Foundation, is a sort of a nexus for pulling all of their resources together when it makes sense, which is often, and marshaling greater resources to go. Our focus is, generally speaking, on kids and young people, and central to that is in the NASCAR Foundation is Speediatrics, which we have gone into communities where our events are in South Florida and Arizona and so on, and we've helped redevelop hospital areas in the pediatrics area for young kids to make it a NASCAR fun theme, and we invested a lot of money, and we're going to do more. So it's a combination of all those things.
Okay. Commissioner Stone, talk a little bit about the hot issues for you over time. I think I asked this before, but I'm curious is how have the issues changed in terms of poverty, education, gender equity?
God, it's,
where has it moved, and what's hot today?
The reason that we call our outreach NBA Cares is so that it can encompass everything. Over the years, there was a steady stream to our door saying that if you look at the prison population, it's because the prisoners have been abused. No, it's because they couldn't read. No, it's because they dropped out of school. No, it's because they did drugs. And after a while, and by the way, we associated with every one of them, anything we could possibly do. And we realized that the needs were really too large and too big even to be expressed. And so what we tried to do with respect to the umbrella of NBA Cares is to encourage our players, our teams, our own people to do the right thing, and let's do it under an umbrella. We focused on places where people could live with using our resources with Habitat for Humanity, where they could learn using various partners, now HP and others, we've had Scholastic, where we build libraries in places where we go, or play, putting in courts. And we set modest goals, which we exceeded by a factor of almost 5. We were going to build 100. We're on our 745th or whatever. But so it's hard exactly to say, but obviously it depends where the noise is in some way. I think that issues of equality for gay and lesbian, transgender and the like is a very high profile. I think that for us, race will always be, if not a direct issue, a subtext in important issues. But overall, it's the way we can lead. I think what you're doing, Brian, with respect to the solar farm that deals with not only your facility, but your a community and your recycling efforts and the like, that's a teachable moment. It's not going to alter the balance of carbon consumption at that time, but it's so important to do. And I think really the most important issue for us is the recognition that the private sector, particularly sports, can be much more effective in all of these ways than government. Not that we have the funding, but in terms of setting the example and leading the way.
And if I can just follow up on that. So as the NBA has gone global, and you're in, China, India, wherever, Europe, how have the issues changed for you?
The issues have changed in a couple of ways. Number one, when I met Mikhail Prokhorov, the present owner of the Brooklyn Nets, in Moscow. I think it was 2006. If you told me it was 6. And we had the Clippers there, and they played Kimsky Moscow and Red Army Moscow. There I was at a Red Army Moscow game. If you live long enough, almost anything. And I watched them kill the Clippers with this Russian lineup, with this Russian lineup of Trajan Langdon, the young man from Bucknell, whose name I forget. I think Papadopoulos or someone else from Greece, and Anderson from Australia, coming out to Russian music. And I realized that the world was changing. But the Clippers went to a hospital and an orphanage. And both of the teams, the Russian teams, went to a little bit under duress. And when they got finished, they were really under duress because they were ticked off at their owners for not having them go sooner, because they recognize the impact that they have on disaffected, unfortunate kids, and they felt silly having had their initial reaction. And that's huge. The other issues that so that's sort of a standard one, but the issue that we're really confronting now is obesity, diabetes, and inactivity is a global scourge that is actually affecting national budgets because of healthcare. And that's going to play a much more important role in places like India. congratulations, our Western ways are catching up. It
That's
has
progress.
serious problems in places. And in China, the government has recognized the notionality that exercise, fitness, and health, not to mention teamwork, are important subjects for as a matter of government policy. So we're seeing and of course, to bring it full circle, it's not bad for business because governments are interested, corporations in those places are interested, and more often than not, our first meeting will be more about NBA cares than about gross rating points and return on investment. And that's fine with us because the two will ultimately move together.
Now, people will be surprised to know this, but NASCAR drivers happen to be extremely fit. I learned this from the U.S. Olympic Committee trainers. So, but that, would that be an issue for you?
It is. It's probably a little lower on our scale, but than it may be for David. But Carl Edwards serves on the President's Fitness Panel. He has been featured in a number of magazines and all that. So, and Jimmy Johnson's going to run a triathlon. So more and more, our drivers are really zeroed in on being in optimum health. And they realize now, they should have realized a long time ago, but that as hot as it is, for as long as it is to drive those cars, it gives you a mental edge. And so anytime they're taking the lead in those areas, I'm with David, it's certainly becoming, obesity, diabetes, all those things, not only here in this country, but around the world, are going to be more and more significant. And we do participate in some of those areas, but we'll have to do more in the future.
Okay, let me turn the conversation a little bit to race and diversity, which has it's cropped up in NASCAR, whose fan base tends to be white. On the other hand, in Europe last week, it's cropped up in football with racist chants. How are you addressing these issues right now?
Well, we're very serious about it, and we look at it much like we would do some of the things in the environment. That it's terribly important socially to get it right, and secondly, it's also good for our business. We open ourselves up to different demographics. Obviously, that's what we're trying to make everybody in this country a NASCAR fan. That's our goal. And the reality is, you don't play our sport in high school or in a sandlot and so on. You have to get experience at your local short track level. Then there are about 800 of those around the country. And so what NASCAR decided to do a number of years ago was start what we call the Drive for Diversity, where we actually, with our partners, have spent tens of millions of dollars over the last 7-8 years working on funding opportunities for drivers who would have never had an opportunity to showcase their skills. We have a combine now that we hold an audition for. If you qualify based on your talent and your speed, we graduate you into a regional racing series, which is where all of the top drivers all come from, that nobody just shows up and runs in the Daytona 500 without a lot of experience. So, and we're real close. We're real close to a couple of breakthroughs. Darrell Wallace is an African-American driver that has shown an enormous amount of promise. He's winning at every level that he's competing at. Sergio Pena is another Hispanic driver that we have high hopes. We're going to get a breakthrough here. And when we do, that'll be very, very helpful for us.
I think that, it's such a broad and important issue that it's just that if we don't as a society say that unacceptable words and behavior are unacceptable, then they're going to creep in or creep back into our society. So we've had the opportunity to say that you just can't use homophobic slurs. You just can't do it. That's all. Now let's move on. It's not acceptable. And with respect to our marketing of the WNBA, we said, because some number of WNBA players are, openly gay. That's a community that we should try to bring to our games, and because that's a group that's identifiable with certain publications, television programs, sponsors, and the like. And it hasn't been easy in terms of what the sort of practices and mores of the last, the previous world history, at least our last 200 years in the U.S. And it's actually liberating to, and then when you see President Obama gets elected and boneheads in Mississippi go out and use racial slurs to denounce the election, the good news there is that the community pushed back, and there were, sort of candlelight vigils saying, no, that's not acceptable. And I think sports is the vigil on a global basis to define what is acceptable and what's not. And in some cases, maybe a remark appears innocent as a vestige, but you can't treat it like that because it wouldn't be fair to the overall issue.
Okay. Now, again, it's festering in Europe right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how they solve it. But I want to.
What's festering?
The racist chant issue and how it's
They
going.
should just throw them out of the game. That's all. It's easy enough.
Well, it's the fans
You
too.
use them, right? March them out. March them out. I mean, it's so relatively easy in terms of that because they do want to come into the game, and so. But that's not acceptable here. Now there are always going to be some exception or another, or something that slips through. But I think it's about the organization that says no, and that's what we do.
Zero tolerance means zero. That means nothing, zero. So, and David's right. It's a pretty simple place to where you want to end up. Is not very difficult to see.
And lead the community, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's the, that's the interesting opportunity there. When we say, well, if you eliminated racial chants, you'd have to shut down the football stadium. But I think that, and I mean what those Americans call soccer when I say football stadium. But that's okay because, there have been games played before no crowds when there was unacceptable crowd behavior. And racial epithets is a different kind of hooliganism that just is not acceptable.
Thank you. Moving ahead, what do you see as the next looming issues that sport might tackle?
I don't think there's one specific thing that's coming at us that would take precedent over everything else that you would identify in such a way. I think it's pretty obvious that the way people consume all kinds of important content or entertainment content is changing. That's obvious, and that we're all from a digital standpoint. I know we're gearing up in a very significant way, trying to help the economy out a little bit. I've hired about 100 people in that space recently. We'll take over Nascar.com ourselves January 1. But it's clear that the digital age is going to be, it's already here. It's the next frontier to navigate, and how we, interact with our fan base, how we disseminate our events across whatever the platform that they're going to consume this entertainment content. The good news is that everybody in sports is in the best position because it's such proprietary, such coveted content that it has the ability to drive a lot of this, and we'll all learn from each other, as David said earlier in the program, and we'll tackle it in a very intelligent way.
I think one is going to be the delivery system, and then one is another message. To me, the delivery system is, back in the early days of the internet, everyone said if you have content, commerce, and community, you are really perfect for internet. And I said, oh, that's great, that's sports. But it's the community, which is the place where, when you have 300 million likes and followers and YouTube videos, a billion YouTube videos, et cetera, and every new development, whether it's a Tumblr or Instagram or what have you, what an influence you can have based upon your attitudes and your messaging, whatever the subject is. But I think the subject that's going to ultimately concern everybody is getting kids off their computer-aided game, Xbox, Wii, PlayStation butts, and have them bounce a ball, throw a ball, take a walk, do anything that sort of moves them in some way rather than keep sitting, because there is going to be, we're sitting here in a world where, even sitting in the U.S., the percentage, of GNP going to healthcare is off the charts. And anyone, and so we're all busy talking about the grand bargain, Simpson Bowls, all kinds of other things that are going to balance our budget and make us all friends again. But if the healthcare costs keep going up because we have sicker populations, we have a real problem. And I think sports, both by the messaging and the activity, has an opportunity to do something really good there.
Hey, let me give you one little example, though, in the digital space. So we have the Daytona 500 in February. We get rained out, unfortunately for us, on Sunday afternoon.
Was that opposite our All-Star game?
Thank
you.
I'm not sure then.
Thank you.
I told
you don't compete.
We
have a rain dance that we do. And I was out there in Orlando dancing. No, I'm teasing.
No, but so on Sunday night, so we reschedule it for the next day on Monday. Of course, it's raining now on Monday. So we're able, with social and digital media, to instantly, we're talking about 180,000 people here, immediately say, we know we told you when you went to bed last night that the race was going to be at noon the next day. We now know it won't be, but it'll be at night. We were able to instantly communicate with our entire fan base and millions of people all over the country who now know, it's going to be in prime time, which worked out better for us. And that doesn't happen 5 or 10 years ago. And we're not going to reach all those people. We're not going to be efficient doing it. That's one little example. And the bigger example is, how you get on the offense with digital media and social media. And I don't think there's I know there's not a set blueprint yet but the sports leagues. But I will tell you this, and the great thing about leagues that have happened over the last 20 years is, we operate so much intellectual property in one form or another, which takes us into virtually every kind of business that you could imagine, gaming or sponsorship and broadcast, digital, social media, commerce. You go down the list of how much, and it's all intellectual property for the most part. And so it makes you, as a sports league, have the kind of expertise that can navigate these very important opportunities. It's exciting.
From a sports league perspective, I love to learn and to watch, talk about copying or what have you, to watch what the parties were doing in the election. I'm always reading and saying, okay, if they knew how to get out the vote and who the voters were, how do you get them to come to games and to watch on TV? And in today's New York Times, for those of you who go to the science section, and there's a big article on how the campaign used psychologists to look at the right messaging. And imagine if we all understood that with respect to the various messages of a non-commercial nature that sports leagues want to get out there. The one thing that struck me is, it's fascinating. If you tell somebody this is from the article, if you tell them at a hotel that don't use the towel, don't throw the towel away, it's good for the environment, you get 29% that say, okay, reuse the towel. If you say to them that 41% of the people in this hotel don't throw away the towel, the number who opt in goes up. So there's something about sharing and wanting to be part of a group, to be part of a community, that I think augurs well for the power of sport on a global basis to both message and to change behavior.
David, we don't get ahead of you very often, but I will tell you this. After the first...
Did you say never?
I said seldom.
Oh.
I said seldom. But after the first President Obama's election 4 years ago, where he pioneered, David's perfected it in this election, but he pioneered social media in terms of getting out his vote, particularly with young people. That's the first thing I did in our staff meeting. I said, go find that person or persons who developed that plan for him. I don't think we actually accomplished it, but I was thinking the same thing.
Actually, we hired him.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, everyone has their own reaction to
I
a
told
campaign.
you we don't win very often.
I get excited when I see these tables of people on computers figuring out how they're going to move voters around. I'm saying they're talking about 110 million people who are going to vote. We only need a lousy few million people to, you know, come see our games, watch us on TV, and in addition, how we could message to be helpful and useful in the broader social issues. So I think you're going to find a lot of corporate allocation of resources to copy the campaigns for the good stuff, both for their sales efforts and their social responsibility efforts.
Terrific. Okay, I think we're out of time. I want to thank both commissioners for their time today. And I just thought of something. You could have a pre-race jog around the track for your spectators to just get them back into shape. I think that would work.
You know, we gotta, you know, you stick to journalism. Take care of the rest. Okay.
Let's hear it for them.